Whiskey here. We're in some pretty wacky times these days, and I wanted to talk about something I felt was not being talked about enough, and that is far left militant groups. Now, most people know plenty about far right militant groups, so I'm not going to get into that much. I mean, it's worth bringing up. It's a real concern, but they seem to go out of their way to not talk about leftist militant groups, so we're going to check into that. It might be a longer ride, but amongst the sorrow, I promise some attempted chuckles. Starting off for you youngins out there, we're going to take a little walk down history lane, and in the 70s and a little bit of the 80s, technically not that long ago, there was a group called the Weather Underground, and these guys, they bombed a lot of governmental buildings. We're talking U.S. Capitol buildings, the Pentagon. They got wild, and the FBI described them as, when the Students for a Democratic Society collapsed in 1969, the Weather Underground stepped forward, inspired by communist ideologies and embracing violence and crime as a way to protest the Vietnam War, racism, and other left-wing aims. Quote, "Our intention is to disrupt the empire, to incapacitate it, to put pressure on the cracks," claimed the group's 1974 manifesto, Prairie Fire. Oh dear, proper sourcing by old school FBI. A separate Time magazine article described them as, while they worried that the bulk of the white working class was corrupted by relative prosperity, how dare they, and ineradicable racism, which they called white skin privilege, they hoped that in the counterculture made up of disaffected young people, they might find a constituency capable of eventually empowering the revolutionary project. And wow, eerie, that is just a big old heaping helping of CRT, critical race theory. So that's pretty scary. And just to kind of seal the deal, so like, how many would be a lot of bombings to you? Like just pick a number in your head and, oh, what would be a lot of bombs for a group to do? Well, these guys did at least 25. The Nashville attack is a clear example of just where this far left militant type thinking can lead to. I also feel like people just don't understand the source where this type of rhetoric is being amplified. There's word games. It's very frustrating. So far from what information we have from local police, it may change later, but it seems this person has been declared transgender and had some sort of emotional disorder. All evidence so far infers that this person was female, and so for how rare that is for a mass shooter to be female, this infers this person was led on a particularly dark path. It's also inferred that there's a manifesto that for whatever reason they haven't released yet that may be insightful for a lot of things, but I'll continue on where I still have plenty to say no matter what's inside that. Now, each side of the media is going to use headline word games and such to spin the story in the direction they want it to go, and thus I want to bring up, I feel like media in general is to blame for the rise of mass attacks. And usually out of that comes all this talk of gun control, and so I always like to remind people that pre-Columbine, America had plenty of access to weapons, yet had very rare any sort of mass shootings. And also notable that when Columbine did happen, that was in the middle of the assault weapons ban. And so it gets very frustrating. Also, especially in these stories that include children, the story would not be much better if it was done with a chainsaw or a samurai sword. As a peek into what instigates these type of events, there was an earlier event plan that was straight up called Trans Day of Vengeance, Stop Trans Genocide. And like, I know, wild, right? And so the Nashville event happened, and they were like, let's just keep this event going. And only until like last minute did they stop because of supposed security concerns and not because they're sane people, and that's just a crazy name for an event. And just in case you're not quite there with me, let's do some little word games. And so like, would you go to the White Vengeance Day and Stop White Genocide rally? Or like, oh, let's turn it down a notch, like let's get a little more tame. How about even the Mechanics Day of Vengeance? Like, the whole concept is crazy. Another example, the Trans Resistance Network did a big old press release on Twitter, and a whole lot of words, basically gave some half-ass condolences, but overall, got to the concept and literally says, hate has consequences. Given the general vibe, they're the repressed ones in this whole news story. And even at the end basically said, better get your pronouns right. So, nice. Jumping to Reddit, we get an example here showing the rampant Christian hate common there. They straight up say, Christian schools are literal child murder factories. Say some miscellaneous nonsense, and then end this spiel with, I have never lost any sleep over dead Christian school teachers, and never will. They are genocidal maniacs who should be executed by the state, not be random vigilantes. Way to really ramp up the commie authoritarianism. Another solid example from Queer Defense Reddit. All of you shall prevent the genocide that is being attempted against you. The usual spiel includes buzzwords like fascist, just kind of generally showing that type of rhetoric. Jumping back to Twitter, Terry here drops his leftist wisdom of, if you really want the Republicans to ban assault weapons, then we need folks to stop killing children and blah 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 folks and start killing Republicans. Shoot one high-ranking Republican and gun laws will change within weeks. Jumping back to Reddit for some discussion brain rot. So on the subjects of Christians being attacked, Fuzzy Yogurt Bucket says there are far more instances of Christian people murdering trans people and raping and murdering children. Comically right under it is the sources I made it up meme.
Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
And, you could have like a numbers game here of being like, well, there's a lot more Christians and statistically yada, yada, yada. But in general, this is a great example of just Reddit's crapping all over Christianity all the time. The leftist rhetoric definitely infers trans people right now are just being actively hunted down in America, just genocided, hunt them as we speak. And so sites like this bring up that concept where they declare 38 trans people were murdered in 2022. And so offhand, that doesn't sound like a particularly lot. And on top of that, they only very few do they declare are some sort of hate crime or I killed you because you were gay or something type reasoning. And so even less, so it's very kind of odd to call that a genocide. And then on top of that, in 2021, apparently there were 50 deaths. So we're apparently approving by 24%, but, genocide. Like what we're actually fighting about is stuff like people being concerned about very young people having permanent life changes due to surgeries and medications and stuff like that. And then things like being concerned about children having very sexually explicit lessons at very young ages before puberty. And things like very similarly related on like, why do you feel the need to have to take young children to drag stripper shows? And other related things, such as just wanting to have women's sports be exclusive and not have to worry about being infiltrated by males. It's also worth noting people that spend the effort to try and warn people like, hey, this bad rhetoric is not good for anybody, that will straight up get you banned on Reddit. So like they don't even allow some sort of calm down capacity, any sort of defusing is immediately removed from these type of groups. Looking into signs of this radical ramp, so we went from like gay pride, simple flags, rainbows, and yay, just everybody be accepted, to all of a sudden it was like, be gay, do crimes, which in particular is a silly one because the rise of that popularity came when USA was way past any, there's definitely not criminal to be gay, so I'm not sure what that means at this point. And then say like you had protect trans kids is a recent one. And already, like, it's trans rights or else with, like, knives and, I'm gonna kill you. Like what? There's clearly no big shift. Like, every corporation is in your favor. And then, like, this big, quick, dark turn out of nowhere. Browsing Etsy, you can see some examples here of what I was talking about. Now, you can still see some happy gay stuff, the classics. But there's some pretty dark stuff. You can see these kind of lean towards violence. One I wanted to talk about was this We Will Tread Where There's Inequality, kind of a remix of the old Don't Tread theme. And as you should know by now, you can't exactly trust the leftists to have the concept of inequality, so basically just saying they'll tread wherever they want. This particular one is gold because the first review that comes up is from Violet Gray here, a very a very chonky person. This is my second shirt I've bought because last week I wore it doing a reparations renovation job for a black friend and got paint on it. So I have a nice one and a work one. I'm happy. And, if you check out their further on the profile, they describe themselves as a trans woman who loves to buy art from QT, POC, and BIPOC artists. So, you can't get much harder core virtual signaling than that is the type of person this product is aimed towards. I wanted to bring up this meme making the rounds, some classic the lefties can't meme. And so it's if the shooter turns out to be a meme. And so starting here, we got a Hispanic, and it's like, build the wall is what they're saying to him. And so that's pretty straw man-y. I would think those type of people would already want that wall built. They're not waiting for a Hispanic shooter to do that. And comically, the left would probably just call him a white nationalist anyway. So moving along, we got Arab, and they say ban the Muslims, and probably pretty doubtful. Most likely, they would be more interested in counterterrorism, trying to really hone in on extremism. That said, hey, you bump it up a notch. Probably not ban all Muslims. At that point, you're like specific countries, etc. Anyway, just a bunch of straw men. And then moving over to trans terrorism is the declaration, which semi-based. We've already had some trans shooters, and wasn't that much of a fuss over it. This wasn't said. This whole topic is only being brought up because it appears the whole purpose of the active shooter event was trans ideology. And so saying trans terrorism, kind of base, kind of exactly what it is. It's not kill the trans or, do anything bad to the trans. It was like, well, that was some trans terrorism. Anyway. And so the zinger at the end is supposed to be old cis straight white male average Joe shooter here is, and we say to him supposedly, we need to ask ourselves, how are we as a society failing these poor troubled young men? What kinds of movies, video games, and music are we making? Kind of a side topic here where most people disagree with this whole video games and movies crap did it. So that's dumb. But keeping on track, so when we apply that, that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm like trying to apply that to trans of like, how did this happen? What could we do for these people? And usually you crap on those people pretty hard when they try and do that. So yeah. Now before I get into some more sweet Reddit gold, I want to take a little side story into how I came across the group, the Socialist Rifle Association. Now, I started seeing on Imgur and Reddit, very similar places, but some videos being passed around of this guy called Beau of the Fifth Column. And, checking him out first, I was annoyed, but also semi-impressed. He was good at, well-spoken, and he was able to present a lot of topics where he seems like he's super reasonable, right? But by the time at the end, a smarter thinking person is just like, yeah, that makes sense if you have absolutely no counters, no argument, no reasonable considerations past what you just said. Like, sure, yeah, fine, buddy. And so looking to it further, this is an interesting trip. I mean, he generally comes off like this hillbilly. You should, he's just talking wisdom, wise old hillbilly. But you look into it further, and you're like, oh, this is interesting. All the headlines, titles on your videos, like if it was a drinking game and you search for GOP or Trump in negative context, like you'd be dead. 0 survivors. Like that's kind of your thing. All you go on about. And look into it even further, you're like, wow, this guy is a straight up social anarchist. And so like his whole thing is being deceitful about it all. And so he's like purposefully trying to like change minds by not being true to what he's actually trying to say.
Not many people, even inside this room, like to advertise their belief in a stateless society. It's not something we signal to the outside world at large often. I don't use the A word in my videos, in any of them. Present the ideology, present the philosophy, and people like it. But if you were to call it what it is and use that name, you're going to turn off a giant group of people immediately.
His background, apparently some vague sense of private military contractor man, didn't actually serve, And not the biggest deal. I'm no space shuttle door gunner myself, but I do make sure and clarify. But for some real spice, apparently he was straight up fully convicted of 7 counts of visa fraud and alien smuggling. Pretty wild. His fans like to be like, oh, everybody deserves a second chance, but I mean, it kind of shows some pretty moral gray area. I don't think his political leanings have changed much since then, but anyway, on that note, so he has these very hard lefty ideas that he sprinkles this attempted reasoning on, and one great example of that is he tried to defend the Gillette ad, and if you're not familiar with the Gillette ad, so they went out of their way to be like, toxic masculinity, every man is just trash, and they need to do better to not be trash. And so the sheer concept to crap on your main customer base is madness. And so essentially, you're only a social justice shill to give any sort of defense to this. And he went all in on it. And just to kind of put it in a different context of how stupid this is, it'd be like, all right, let's make a Dove ad talking about toxic femininity. And they're just going on and on about like, hey, ladies, when your friend leaves the room and you just like talk a bunch of crap to your other friends about her, you should do better. Like, see, it's crazy. Like that commercial hasn't been done because it's crazy. And no group, like it doesn't matter if you're any sort of gender, sex, whatever, like you can't hate on your main customer base. It's madness. Comically, for some side scandal, on his website there's at least 3 articles, and he didn't write them, but I mean it's still his website. So back in the day, not that long ago, like 2017, so there were some articles talking about the reasonable concept that trans activists are going to start stomping on women's rights. And so he didn't talk about that anymore now that he's hanging out with people like the serfs and other far lefties. But for a little flashback, so let's chat. One example includes, as trans activists continue the rhetoric of violence, public silence tells them that their violence against women is supported. Speak out against this new and edgy form of male violence and urge your news sources to do the same. Another article includes, trans people make up an incredibly minute percentage of the population, so why must women erase their identities to satisfy trans women? Why can't trans women claim their own identity instead of approaching the issues of women? Stop trying to erase the female experience. There is no way to change biological sex. Gender is a social construct that assigns characteristics and behaviors in response to biological sex. Oh, based! Needless to say, he didn't say those words anymore. But bringing it back home, here's some words that Reddit has to say about him. So let's see here. Liberal gun owners. I'm actually thinking he's not a liberal. I think he may be an anarchist. He's a bit further left than liberal anyway. He's not a liberal. He's an anarchist. In any case, he's further left than a liberal. And yes, I like him a lot. So Reddit. And yes, alright, I like him and watch his videos frequently. Also, I use him for radicalizing the right-leaning individuals in my social circles, since he tends to explain things a lot without using trigger words. Example, socialism, and his experience accent format tends to keep them watching instead of immediately dismissing him. Redneck anarchist who knows how to speak to Appalachians since he grew up in the KYTN border. While I don't like the anarchy part of his ideology, he doesn't talk about it at all. His mission is simply to get the message out about that capitalism and conservatism is trash. My words, 10/10 recommend. Another one comments, I strongly suspect it's mostly Democratic moderates that watch cable news and don't understand the manufacture of consent. His conclusions are so mild and easily dismissed. Anyway, just a thought. He's very watchable and likable, and you can feel smart just watching him. Opium for the moderates. And so this in particular is comical because Bo goes out of his way to like crap on what he calls moderates. And so this guy calls him, for the moderates, and Bo's like trying his best to like not. I mean, it's just like clearly everybody's so far left they have no concept of what moderate is. Now, if you're still with me, you might be thinking, why did I just waste your time with this side story? Well, the reason is because Bo is one of the perfect cases of showing like the real deal leftist militant pipeline. Now, the left is over here like, it's the alt-right pipeline to work out and like exercise. And like this guy is like for realsies purposefully, intentfully being deceitful to convert what I would say libertarians, but anybody he can like reason to or convince, he's trying to push them super far down the left lane. Bringing it back home, so those Bo comments led me to the treasure that is the Socialist Rifle Association on Reddit. And so for a quick scan, they don't do it as much anymore, but for some background on what these folks are about. So for a lot of posts, they would go on and on about the YPG and the YPJ. And I'm not super hip to all the Syrian stuff going on. And the Kurds have helped us out with fighting terrorism in the past. So I don't hate them by default. But if you look into what they got going, it's pretty wild. So here's a Wikipedia description, which, you know, maximum leftist, right? It's so. Here's an example. So they call them with democratic ambitions based on an anarchist, feminist, and libertarian socialist ideology, promoting decentralization, gender equality, environmental sustainability, social ecology, and pluralistic tolerance for religious, cultural, and political diversity. And these values, just keep going on. Basically, they are trying their best to do some comedy utopia over there. Now, these concepts aren't necessarily bad by themselves. Like, it's not bad to have gender equality and care about the environment, but like, they are in the middle of like, you can't do any of these things very well if you're in the middle, you have no security. So it's just the autonomous zone over there, no organization, and they're just kind of rewinding back the clock, showing what happens when you don't have a nation together. And that's one of their main complaints. When you ask them, like, oh, you know, what are you really about? You know, like, check this example.
A revolution that on the basis of grassroots democracy, women's liberation and ecology gave answers to the multi-ethnic and multi-religious backgrounds in the Middle East and proposed an alternative besides the failing system of capitalism and nation states.
It's like, yes, capitalism and just nation states. That's your big problem here, not like ISIS, you know, religious extremism or authoritarians in Syria. Like pretending you're like gonna be all eco smart over there. Like, you're burning diesel to survive. I don't blame you, man. Like, thinking like you got a bunch of wind farms and it's a utopia. Grasslands over there. It's crazy. Moving on to a solid SRA vibe post, I wanted to revisit the old Don't Tread. And, you know, getting back to the back. So the core idea of the Don't Tread flag is the idea you're saying, I would like to avoid government tyranny. I would like the government to not repress me. And so for whatever reason, they hate the people that like that flag. And so now they've added the pride flag to the background, and they've like, all right, now it's great because it represents me more. And so this is a little comical because it appears design-wise they couldn't fit the new flag. And so they ran out of room, and that kind of shows the divide of the gays versus everybody else. So that becomes an interesting little side note. Of course, apparently no one who has these flags has irons. So always props to anybody that has a normal-looking flag and didn't just like get it out of the box and is like, let me just show the internet or whatever nonsense they got going on. And then, of course, the title includes human rights are human rights. And, of course, it brings, you know, the concept of what they're fighting for. Like, no one's repressing the gays at this human rights level. Like, we're just saying, stop being weird around young children. And so apparently they're fighting for their human rights to be able to do that.
Excuse me, ma'am. No porn at the bar.
Oh, it's okay. I'm transgender.
Oh, I had no idea. Do whatever you want all the time.
No pretty picture, but some solid fear-mongering. So we got conservatives are trying to disarm us while simultaneously making us need guns even more. The right is calling for violence against trans people and to disarm us. And then it just goes on and on about this, you know, alarmist rhetoric I've been talking about. Oh, this next one's good. They're just handing the memes to me here. So starting off, they're basically complaining that someone's pointed out that a lot of the recent shooters have been trans or non-binary. And so they complain, they start the party off doing a no-no, and they try and say, oh, so-and-so wasn't really non-binary or wasn't really trans. And so that kind of brings up the issue of like, hey, maybe self-identification's not so great. I guess now we can just pick and choose when that's appropriate, who's for realsies and who isn't. And even, let's just say, hey, they are faking. They are just making nonsense up. But that proves there are some perks, legally or culturally, to declaring yourself that way. So that's a bit of an oopsie. So it's from a different group, but I felt related enough to bring up. So I keep seeing this one around the internets. And so it would be, I would call this statistics liar type meme. But anyway, jumping in, so right off the bat, they've misdefined mass shootings. So they're clearly including gang warfare, things most normal people would not consider an active shooter scenario event. And so then they've got cis, aka normal people, almost 3,000, and then they've got trans at 3, which comically, the type of people that would make this graph would include non-binary. So that should at least be 4. So they are already cheating as far as they can cheat. So even though, you say you fix this graph, it would still be a lot more normal people who have been active shooters. But they're missing the whole point that obviously trans was 0 not that long ago, and so there's this huge per capita increase, and they just want to be like, it's not a problem. For anybody browsing the Socialist Rifle Association group, it's pretty hard to miss. There's a pretty in-your-face trans theme going on, and I expected a little more commie, a little more socialist, but holy wow, there's a lot of trans. It's hard to miss. And while checking out some of their other, like they have their own website and they have their own YouTube, there was some sweet drama going on their website. So I hunted it down, and it appears the Minnesota SRA got a little wild, said basically, fuck the Second Amendment, and we don't want our enemies to have guns. Of course, we're just going to make up who we think our enemies are. And then we're little edgelords, and dropped a Karl Marx quote of, "When our turn comes, we shall make no excuses for the terror." And so this was too much even for the normal SRA. So I just kind of shows a mask-off moment of this far left militant stuff I've been talking about. Noting a related group, so there's the John Brown Gun Club. It's kind of funny to see Reddit here, kind of talk to him like, oh, it's just the thing, man. It's the concept. Very Antifa-like for seemingly no reason. There's a lot of these clubs in different cities, but they made the old terror list when one of them attacked an ICE facility and died, so the government is not going to forget about that. Wiki, for a quickie side note, tried to smooth that over, talk about that as little as possible, how very wiki-like. But the main idea, these John Brown Gun Club people are active and are not nothing. Now this one's some solid infighting post here. So one guy's complaining about, oh, the Portland community is not militant leftist enough. And so they go on and on about silly infighting stuff of not meeting expectations. But this guy here in a later comment is really choice. So he's talking about how happy he was about Michael Reinhold, or however you say it. Like if you're not familiar, the only guy who's been documented to do an Antifa kill. So he's real proud of that. And then he's talking about like hanging out with Maoists and just like, oh, I can never find a right fit for myself because I'm sure I'm a real blast to hang around. So as I was saying, in the SRA, there was a lot of trans stuff going on, and thus so it wasn't hard to next run into the trans guns group. And for as a starting point, they've got a pretty amusing description. So they say here, a place for users of all genders, including cis users and eggs, to discuss weapons, especially firearms, strategy, and related topics. Armed trans women, armed trans men, armed NBs. If you want to defend yourself, buy a 5.56x45, AR-15, and 9x19 Glock, and equip them both with a red dot sight, Holosun Trigicon, and Weapon Light, Surefire Streamlight. Be sure to check out the Armed Gamed Agenda. Technically for a good chunk of it, not bad advice. I think I would have just done it as a pinned advice topic, but anyway, a little comedy for you before we get deep into it. So jumping into some roasting, so we got Protect Trans Youth here with your classic, very awkward selfie. Now, and like, there's all kinds of places where you can have a silly gun post, but like this, it doesn't matter what sex, whatever what you are. This is going to be a silly picture that deserves ridicule. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't just be wearing a dress and wacky sandals with your gun thinking anybody's going to take you seriously. Like, So I feel like that's being missed. Like, moving on, we're going in strong theme here. We got, we are queer, we are here, and we're ready to clear fascist scum from the face of this earth. And, you know, for starters, this is not a good picture. This is bad lighting. And we're missing something pretty important here. There is no gun. So you do not meet the bare minimum of trans guns together. So, like, it doesn't matter what creature you are at this point. Like, you are not even meeting noob airsoft standards of, like, expectations. Like, this is embarrassing to any humanoid. Next one up. So, we're getting into patches in my realm. So we have a patch here that says, I'm out of estrogen and I have a gun. So it's pretty wild. Kind of inferring mental instability. Also a weird flex, yo. So like the worst spin possible of the coffee and guns patch, I guess. I don't know. The comments do not properly flame how terrible of an idea this is. I just wanted to note that. Almost missed this gem. So this one's titled, How to Handle Firearms with Mental Illness. And this brings up most other people outside these communities are kind of worried about this exact thing, where it seems like there's a lot of mental illness mixed with trans, and now we're in trans guns. And so it's very in your face at this point. And oddly enough, this person starts with the concept of interested in firearms and the movement to make sure persecuted minorities are armed in the way they want to take on that responsibility. So it's like a total side subject to start with, but in a whole, the post is just them being concerned about self-harm. And a lot of the comments are mostly kind of like workarounds, very few commit to the full-on, probably guns aren't good for you. This next one, I feel like just really captures all the essence of what I would call a full all-in Reddit poster, a true Redditor. so this guy goes, yeah, so I'm going through a rough divorce. Wife had an affair with my best friend, fun times. Decided to treat myself to some shopping therapy. Very, very, very expensive shopping therapy. Making a Stormtrooper belt setup with the DAA link system in all white with white mag pouches. Hella stoked. Now, looking at a screenshot here, his purchase list, which appears to be about $300, essentially for a battle belt setup. Now, this is worth noting because he considers this a, quote, very, very, very expensive, which is about $300. This is not a new truck. This person apparently is old enough to have been married and considers $300 3x expensive. To top it off, apparently the only comment this person got was from Onion of Shame saying, please paint trans pride stripes on it. So I would say the only thing this person had going for him was the art direction of their battle belt rig. And this one person doesn't fully approve of even that. Showing some more fear-mongering, so we got one titled, Are We at War? A Not Very Good Video to Bring Attention to This Issue. Now, I'm going to go ahead and be crazy and assume that the poster is the video creator, and so they're already, like, barely any confidence. There's if you actually watch the 6-minute video, they don't really talk about much. They're kind of rambling, you know, the general concept of some sort of 5th-generation trans war. Pretty nutty, pretty autistic, but it's silly, and I'm able to laugh at it, but, I mean, this shows another example of like how under threat these people feel. Continuing down this pit of doom, I went ahead and went to the armed gay agenda. And it kind of looks a lot like trans guns, but I wanted to show this one post. I mean, it's just kind of like, come on, where people are allowed to have fun on the range. People, you know, have some silly good times. But it's a little much. Like, you think, I don't know, you're owning the chuds or whatever, but it just kind of, it feels like you should have a little bit more self-awareness. Jumping around more, I found liberal gun owners, and so I just like to take a moment to kind of bring it up that all of these groups have this problem where they hate the GOP, but then people they keep voting for all keep trying to take away their guns. So it's kind of a funny moment. I'm enjoying their suffering because they're, for the most part, crazy people.
Yes! Yes! Oh, let me taste your tears, Scott. your tears are so yummy and sweet.
But anyway, but moving on. This particular post, so this person declares, headline, "Are there any alphabet gun creators?" And I'm going to say it all because it's pretty comical. So, core text, "Hey, I'm a trans queer gun nut, and I've been wanting to ask this for a while. All I see most of the time regarding gun channels are old cis dudes who may or may not be a bunch of homophobes, transphobes, and I feel a bit conflicted about consuming their content. Are there any queer gun YouTubers out there? If there are any, can you send me the link? Thank you in advance. Godspeed." Interesting with the Godspeed at the bottom, but anyway, so core problem, like, this is all madness. Like, first of all, they've already established that they're not sure. They just assume, like, normal people are transphobes. Also, like, why pigeonhole yourself? Why worry about it? It's just crazy. You're limiting yourself on content, on these wild, non-existent concerns, and it's all like sexuality based. So like what are we gonna hunt down? Like, oh, I can't watch this YouTuber unless he's a bukkake expert, or I can't follow this YouTuber unless he's a piss master. Like the conceptually crazy town. And of course, they post this, no one brings that up, and they just find like a couple examples. It's crazy. Escaping Reddit for a little bit, I want to get into a little bit more serious. So, this example is your classic threatening with a gun. This person got a little famous doing this, and first of all, I don't know why they felt the need to charge it 3 times, have 3 bullets to come out to do whatever they got going on, but I mean, it's just every warning sign possible. The name is Pinko Scum. This person talks about the genocide and transphobes and just generally feeling threatened. And when you look into the background, of course, YouTube's just full of far leftist, anti-capitalist nonsense. It just shows every time this happens, this type of rhetoric is clearly not making this person feel better about themselves, about people around them. Like, everything negative is coming out of this far left militant nonsense. To start to wrap things up, I hope most of us can agree the rioters of January 6th were a bad thing. That said, trans or not, the type of far left militant ideology I've been talking about has led to things such as the Chaz Chop event in Seattle, where, if you're not familiar, for over 20 days, both private and governmental land was straight up occupied, taken over by force. And it led to nothing good. Like, there were at least 4 shootings, arson, sexual assault allegations, and they straight up abandoned the police station there. We're talking Middle East level, like, just giving up protection facilities for crazy people.
This morning, hundreds of people in Seattle occupying a now abandoned police precinct.
What do we want? When do we want it?
The takeover coming after the Seattle Police Department abruptly surrendered the building after weeks of clashing with protesters. Now boarded up and abandoned, the building is renamed the Seattle People Department.
And then on top of that, the replacement that was supposed to be an improvement over the cops, the self-appointed security forces, ended up shooting 2 black kids that were on a joyride, straight up killing one and seriously injuring another. And never were any charges. They couldn't find. Oh well, don't hear about that on the news very much now, do we? So I think worth bringing just how crazy of a situation that is, and it seems like no one talks about it anymore. In conclusion, unfortunately, I don't have all the magic answers, but as a starting point, I just wanted to highlight what I felt were concerns that the majority of the media is just glossing over or purposefully hiding, just kind of going out of their way to overlook. At the very least, though, I hope you found this video informative. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to support us, check out the MIL-SPEC Monkey Store. Although known for morale patches, we also specialize in a good selection of DIY hardware and tactical accessories.